Hello, my friends. This is week 2 of my journey, and I'm sitting outside. It is beautiful weather here. It's like maybe late 20s, and so I thought I would record it from outside. So hopefully this all works out again, and I'll try and get through it as quick as I can, but there's just so much happening as always. So on the screen, you can see Arundel Castle. And Arundel was a little, I guess you call it a village, maybe a town, but that is just the most beautiful castle. We didn't get to go in it because we didn't have time. But on this day, we were invited to go and look around the vintage shops in town by a new friend that I have now, who's a friend of my friend. And her name happens to be Suzie as well. And so we went and looked around town with her, and we went to a lovely beer garden and had some lunch, and then went back to have a very nice afternoon tea with 6 ladies and a 12-year-old boy who is Lisa's nephew. So that was an amazing start to this week. On the other side of the screen is Checo, who is the puppy that Lisa's looking after. He has what we call John Howard eyebrows. He is very gorgeous and quiet and just potters around. And so we're still in London, but we're in a suburb of London at the moment. So I will get stuck into my story. So one of the things, it's hard for me to work out what to put on my main screen, but this week we went to watch a play called Quartet in Autumn. So odd that things happen and you wonder why they happen. This play was an invite of Lisa's cousin as well. And it was about 4 older people, almost at retirement age, and the different journeys that they were taking. And so it was set after the war, so it wasn't really, I'd say maybe it was in the 50s or 60s, but it was really lovely. It was in a tiny little theatre that we went to see this show. And I can't tell you much about it, but if you go online, you can find it. It's still happening in the Arcola Theatre in London. But what it helped me come up with were some of my reflections for the week, which I'll try and unpack, but I'm going to unpack them at the end as well because I've actually written notes and I need to read them because you know me, I like to be a perfectionist. So the first thing I wanted to say was something has to end for something new to begin. And I feel like that's something I want to leave you sit with while we're doing this talk. And then when my path is blocked, it's time for me to, and then the word is wait. And for those of you again who know me, you will know that's not necessarily the path that I would take. So that was one of my reflections for the week. And then lastly, it was and is to recognize beauty in all aspects of life. And so I'm going to talk about that as we go along as well. Now, I did realize last week that I didn't show you all the pictures of the flowers that I'd seen at the Chelsea Flower Show. So I wanted to just show you some more of them because, again, they were just incredible. I don't think I was overwhelmed by the show. However, there were overwhelming flowers. I don't know if you can hear that, but we're right near the hospital. And so the other day it was 34 degrees, and 34 degrees in London in May is the hottest May day they've had on record. And the hospital went all day. The ambulances went in and out. So I don't know if you can hear it when I'm recording, but I'm listening to them in the background. So these are just some of the flowers that were there. And for some unknown reason, I picked a lot of purple flowers, but and roses, as I talked about last week, that are my mum's favourite plant. They were my mum's favourite plant. So I'm not going to go into them in any depth, but I just wanted to show you there were lots more flowers than what I showed you last week. So this week we went to some towns. I went to Hampton Court Palace, which is in, I'm going to say Kingston, but I'm not actually sure if it's Richmond or Kingston. But anyway, we jumped on this on the Thames and went up the Thames in this little boat and got to Hampton Court Palace. And I'll talk to you a bit more about that, and I'll show you lots of photos. But one of the things that was quirky that we noticed was the yarn bombing that's still happening everywhere. But this was a Sir David Attenborough, obviously, 100-year-old post box that had been yarn bombed with all the animals. So there's all these quirky things that you can take photos of. And I've got dozens of them, but I won't show you them all because I want to get through this. Otherwise, we'll be here for hours. So this is Hampton Court Palace. So if you know your history, which I didn't really, but this is Henry VIII's castle. He started building this palace. This was his home, and all of his 6 wives actually lived at some stage, for some shorter than others, time in the palace. But then it was William III. He also lived here, and I'll show you some photos of the 2 Georges that also lived here. So it is absolutely huge, and it's got the most amazing chimneys. So if you ever get the chance to look it up, do that because it's amazing. And the other thing I want to tell you about this photo is lots and lots of places around London are now leaving patches of their gardens, and it's all the councils and all people's gardens, their personal gardens, are being left so that there's more greenery for the insects and the bees and butterflies to live in. So this whole paddock was just beautiful in front. So I took there's a photo on the left up close of just the thickness of all these beautiful flowers. Now, I'm not sure about all of them. There's some cornflowers there and some poppies, but I don't know about all the others, whether they're weeds or whether they're planted flowers. But anyway, it was very beautiful. And there's Henry on the other side, of course, looking rather trim compared to the Henry that was actually famous. Apparently, when we went into the kitchens, which are actually there on the left, his kitchens were staffed by dozens and dozens of people, but he used to have 40 courses and 40 choices of food that he would eat for a meal. So they were cooking all day, every day. And apparently the number of staff it took to maintain his palace was just incredible. So I guess he was a large employer back in the day. You may not want to have worked for him, but apparently if you worked in the kitchen, you got to get leftover food to take home, which would have been a bit of a bonus if there was any left over. So the palace itself was really ornate. I guess it looks quite stark on the outside. There's not much decoration like in Italy. You get the Baroque churches on the outside that have got all the decorations. But inside it's certainly got gold everywhere and floor to ceiling. That's his crown. Apparently it's not the real one. It's a replica. But, pretty flash in the day, I'm sure. And so this is his church that's inside. And there were lots and lots of rooms, like this one on the left, quite kept quite dark, and that was helpful because it was actually cool inside the palace, because this was the day it was 34 outside. And there's on the right is Lisa's 12-year-old nephew. Well, she calls him her nephew. He calls her auntie, but they're really like third cousins. But that's the Queen's stairs, and they're very shallow and very easy for my wonky knees to climb up, which was handy. Just really grand, as they did to try and impress, all the people. But there's so much out for you to see, and there was an entry fee to get in, but it was free audio tour, so that was free, and I did that as I went along, which I love doing because it tells you all the details about what you're looking at. So these are the 2 Georges, George I on the left and George II on the right, and they lived there. And obviously, and when you think about it, they built Georgian wings onto the palace. So obviously more uh, pretty, I guess, with their clothes, more ornate, even though Georgian style architecture is not really ornate, but it's very organized. So there was a whole wing, there's whole wings been put onto this palace every time a new king would come into play. So I wanted to show you some of the, oh, I don't know whether you're going to see that. I'll have to move myself. I don't know if that's actually going to work, but some of the art that we saw inside the palace. So that's a Caravaggio on the left. Those of you, again, who know a bit about art, we see lots of him in Italy, and it's one of Lisa's favourite artists. And that's a Gainsborough in the middle. It's funny how you see, dozens and dozens of paintings. And then when something about this painting hit me, and so I went up and had a look at who it was by, and it's by Gainsborough. So you could tell that there was something special about it. And then on the side of that is more like something more in my taste as well. I just had to take the photo of the Bombs Away a laxative image, which shows the other end of the scale in the artwork. That wasn't in the palace. That was actually in the street outside the palace. So we travelled by river, and I'll move that back up there. Hopefully I'll not disrupt things. And so this is the gates into the palace from the river. And so people would arrive and be welcomed into the palace through these huge gold-plated gates. And when we were going back in the afternoon, and it was still, because the temperature here doesn't get cool until about, I mean, it's 6 o'clock now here, and it's still, 28 degrees. So these boys were jumping from the barges on the side of the river. It reminded me of Toad of Toad Hall, and I know last week I got to show you some of the images that I love of Toad of Toad Hall, and this reminded me of Messing About on the River, which, if you know the book, it's just something that Toad says, and I just love it because it seemed like doesn't matter how old you are, how many years have passed, there are still children messing about on the river. And so where we are is, I think it's about half an hour into London itself. It's a suburb, and it's quite posh. There's some famous people live out here, but what you're looking at is Canterbury. So we hired a car yesterday to go down to see Lisa's uncle, who is 91, and he lives independently on his own in the same house he's lived at for a really long time. And he was a doctor. And so we went down to Canterbury, which is on the way to his place. I wanted to see Canterbury Cathedral. However, when we got there, it cost like £30 or 20 something pound to get into to look at the cathedral, and they had gates outside, so you couldn't even walk around it and take photos. And we only got there with 1 hour to spare, so I didn't actually get to go inside. But often, a church is a church is a church, and I've seen York Minster, so I figure it's probably similar. But maybe another time I'll come back and go and look at the cathedral. It's in this beautiful little part of the city which has been left, very much as it was in the day. And then again, I don't know Ted Lasso, but apparently lots of people know Ted Lasso. And this is Ted Lasso's pub. And that is in the town that we went to. And I'm going to say, I think that's Canterbury, but I'm not sure. It could be here. That's how much I pay attention. Everything starts to blur. One of the, I guess, the things that happened as well in Italy is if you see too much, you end up just forgetting the individual parts of it. So, trying not to take for granted the little things that you see. This is the backyard where I'm sitting right now on the left. And for a London home, it's a really big backyard, and it's really well designed because the doors you can see, they've got these wonderful big bifold doors, and you can actually leave them open, and there's no screens because obviously they don't leave them open for very many weeks of the year. the flowers that you can see were really beautiful until the 34-degree day, and then most of them just shriveled up. And on again, you'll see a Checo on the right hand side. And if you can see his eyelashes and eyebrows. They're just hilarious. And he's a very sweet little dog, and he just sits around and doesn't give you much expression, but he's just very sweet. And so that actually brings me to the end of what I wanted to show you. But I wanted to talk to you, and I'm so sorry, but I want to read it because I can't remember it as well as I want to say it. Because the things that I learned this week um, are just, I guess, this transition, and I'm calling this a transition to retirement because you can't really just switch off. And the play that we saw reminded me that everyone is going to have a different journey. And what I'm doing is different to what Lisa's doing. It's different to what anyone else is going to do when they plan their retirement. And we all have such different parts of our lives that we need to consider. So, of course, if anyone wants to switch off and you don't want to listen to this, you can switch off. That's why I'm going to do it at the end. But something that I wanted to think about, I wanted to talk about was we talked about change last week and how when you're changing from working to not working, it's a huge thing. But when you think about change, it happens every minute of every day. You're consciously making decisions that happen every single second of your life. So some are conscious and some are unconscious. And when you look at that, change is therefore constant, which is a little deep. But it's not something to be scared about, but it means that endings are beginnings. So there is a beginning of something new that will eventually end. And it's just a cycle. So that's to do with the first point in my talk. And again, I'm on my little laptop and I can't even see my notes. So I'm just going to try and bluff my way through this. Not what I would do if I was presenting to students. But if you know me well, the second point was around when something's going to happen, when I'm going to do, there's something blocking my path, I'm going to wait. And if you know me, I'm a typical Aries. I'm also the eldest child. And so if I needed to do something, I just made it happen. And I wanted to say that I was pretty lucky as a child because even though I grew up on a farm and we didn't have, no one in my family had gone to university, my dad told me that I could do anything that I wanted if I worked hard enough. And so I guess if I come across a blockage, I just blast my way through it. I don't even think too much about it. It's likely that I could just bulldoze my way through. But in my effort to become an Aries that's acting on a higher plane, I'm going to take a pause and try and see things from a different perspective and try and think of a different solution than blasting my way through. So it could be even removing myself from situations rather than getting myself in a lather and having to get all my emotions happening and then get angry about something. And it happened this week. I left home having done everything I could possibly have done to be organized for my family. And of course, something hasn't turned up, something important that we need to help with my granddaughter. And so instead of, typing out an angry email and going off at this company that hasn't done their job properly or that haven't emailed to say something wasn't filled in properly, I just delegated this to my son so he could follow it up with the people that needed to do it. And again, if you know me, I'm not good at delegating. I tend to be someone who likes to keep the stuff happening that I've got control of. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about then the people, because I know last week I was talking about the people that I met. And as I said, we had the most wonderful afternoon tea with the people at Arundel Castle, and I hope I'm saying that right. It's not Arundel, it's Arundel, not Arundel like in Queensland. But But this week I've been really, really lucky and fortunate to spend time with Lisa's family. From her cousins, I've met cousins, I've met second cousins, and I met her wonderful 91-year-old Uncle Tom. And he was in his home, and he's 91. Like, that is incredible in itself. I just can't even imagine his life journey. But he was telling us about his story of a steamship ride that he went from Australia to England, a steamship ride, 6 weeks in length. And his eyes just lit up as he was telling the story. And it was his memories again, that he's someone who's recounting a story from so many years ago, just like it was yesterday, and about his friends and where they went to. And he loved Italy like I love Italy. And he, just to tell you the type of person he is, like, so he has a walker that he uses, but in his staunch determination, he wouldn't let us help him make the cup of tea he wanted to give us. He had to do it himself, and and bring it in to us, and look after us and make sure he was, giving us a proper afternoon tea. And then the wonderful 12-year-old nephew that went out with us. That's a big thing for a 12-year-old boy to hang out with six women. And he did it so beautifully. And he's such a quirky, amazing young man who told us that he's going to be 7 foot tall when he grows to his full height, and he wants to be the next James Bond. So I just I wanted to talk about them. Like, I didn't want to show you the photos of them because that I haven't got permission off them to do that. But I want to talk about them because the beautiful moments that you spend with people, and my friend allowing me to share those with her, is something that I'm going to remember forever. And I thought back to when I was an early childhood teacher, and how I remember sitting at a rest time, and I was looking at all the children as they're getting ready to sleep. And I thought every single child in this world is beautiful. And on my trip, I'm seeing that every day. So reflecting on beauty, beauty in flowers and in the scenery, in the art I'm seeing, in the plays, in the animals. There's squirrels running around the trees here in the backyard, and beautiful birds um, in the trees, because obviously summer, everything's out in London. But I just feel so lucky to be living the life I'm living at the moment. And I hope you're all well. I hope your lives are going fine back there in rainy old Australia. Although I did hear it's cleared up in my hometown, so hopefully it's lovely where you are. So that's the end of my week too. Next week, we're going a bit more remote out of London to a little town. But tomorrow I'm going to go see the Globe Theatre, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, and also the Tate Gallery. So hopefully there'll be some nice photos for next week's post. Hope you're all well, and lots of love. Take care, and I'll see you next time.